This week on the Unamplified Podcast.
Hello, Africa. Welcome back to the Unamplified Podcast and Happy New Year to you. My name is Cynthia Mbamalu, your host. And as always, I have my amazing co-host.
Hi, everyone. My name is Queen CY, always coming with the vibes. Welcome to the Unamplified Podcast.
And today we are trying something new. We have a visiting co-host. He's been here before as a guest, but today he's a visiting co-host, Ibrahim Farouk.
Thank you so much for having me. It feels so different to be here as a co-host and not as a guest. I didn't know whether I should call myself the special one or something.
We can go with the special one. You're allowed to feel special. And to all our listeners, our audience, we always love to read your comments. So don't forget to subscribe. If you are yet to subscribe, just click that button, subscribe, like, comment, share. And always let us know how you feel about each episode. Recently, we've had series of incidents of insecurity in our country, Nigeria. If you're those of us who follow the news, there are more reports of abductions in the FCT across different states. And so this episode would focus our conversation on insecurity in Nigeria. So I would say we're really honored to have with us an important guest. He is a security management risk expert, Mr. Kabir Adamu. Welcome so much, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here on Unamplified Podcast.
Yes.
It's my honor to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was so happy when we reached out and because I know you have a very busy schedule. So when you confirmed, it was like almost a dream come true.
I align with what you do. And so when you reached out, yes, I had some things on my calendar, but then I shifted them and made sure, thank God I'm here.
Yeah. So we've seen almost every day you turn on the television or you go online or just the newspapers, you get, at least you'd have a report of abduction, either in the Northwest or in the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, or even travelers who were on a journey in interstate travels. And the question is, why this increasing level of insecurity almost across every part of the country? How did we get here?
Once again, thank you. We got here because, in my honest opinion, we are not addressing the root causes of insecurity. And I'll quickly mention some of them. The justice system, that is in all areas of responsibility, I would say not effective and not efficient. Offenders are still able to commit offenses. They are not arrested, neither are they prosecuted. And so, sadly, the likelihood is that more people who see them benefiting from the proceeds of the crime that they've committed would now, instead of doing the lawful thing, attempt to go into that type of crime. One example is kidnap for ransom. If people engage in kidnap for ransom, collect the ransoms in hundreds of millions, and they're able to spend it, then the young person who sees that is likely to want to embrace that type of crime and not do the lawful thing. As an example, a pastoralist who spends 25 years of his life rearing any form of livestock, at most at that age of 25, if he sells off what he has, if he's lucky, he will just get £1 million. Now, someone else who does abduction for 1 year could likely get many folds of that 1 million. And so that deterrence element within our criminal justice system is not effective. Number two is climate change and inability as a society, especially from the side of the government, to introduce adaptation measures to reduce the effect of climate change. Now, this has a consequence on the farmer-herder violence, as an example, and then several other aspects of our life. And then we can talk about weapons proliferation. There are so many weapons in the hands of non-state actors, as it were, today. In fact, when we last did the comparison, just to give us a context, our law enforcement agencies have in their possession about 1 million weapons, if you put all of them together. Now, the non-state actors, if you put the criminal groups, the terrorist groups, And then even the other ones that are neither here nor there. As an example, the state formations like Ebubuegu, the Amotekun, and the others, they have about 6.5 million weapons in their circulation.
Wow, that's almost 5 times more.
More than. So even if you isolate those state level ones and remove them from the 6.5, you find out that we still have about 4.7 million in the hands of illegal non-state armed groups.
Wow.
And so there is more weapons in the arms of those players than there are in our law enforcement agencies. Number 4 is drug addiction, unfortunately. Anytime you see crime being committed, especially violent crime, the likelihood is that there will be weapons and then there will be drug addiction involved. Other issues are the socioeconomic circumstances that we've found ourselves in, and which has been exacerbated by some of the recent policies, government policies, that maybe the intention may be good, positive, but the effect unfortunately has not been. So one of them is the removal of fuel subsidy. And then the attempt to float the naira. As at today, the dollar is being exchanged for about 1,300 plus.
Yeah, I think I saw 320 or so.
Exactly. So imagine companies have shut down. SMEs are worstly affected. Then even the bigger ones, they've shut down. Now, all of these socioeconomic conditions have driven people into the unemployment market, and that is the pool from which these non-state armed groups actually recruit from. So those are some of the drivers, and in my honest opinion, as a people, we've not done very well in attempting to address those drivers. We can also talk about our security management system. Earlier on, I spoke about the justice system that is failing to arrest and punish offenders. But more importantly, the security system too, that does not seem to be up to speed with the nature of the crime that we have in today's world. There, perhaps in the course of our conversation, we will discuss the security system in detail, and then I'll talk a little bit more.
Yes, because I would want us to have a special conversation around our security system and the architecture itself. But when you were speaking, I remember part of our planning for the show, we went through the Beacon Intel and basically the security report for 2023 by the Beacon Consulting Limited, which is your institution. And one shocking data said in December 2023 alone, about 519 abductions for just 1 month. And I know it also highlighted for the year what the numbers were. From your assessment, why do we have this increase in the numbers of abduction? And what was the overall assessment as of last year? That's the other part. And do we have geopolitical zones, differences across the 6 geopolitical zones when it comes to these incidents of insecurity?
So just to give a context, what we do is through our collection platforms, we are able to collect data on security developments. We collate that data, analyze that data, and then we present it in a format that would be understandable to different segments of society. So what we did in the December report is a presentation of incidents that happened in December. That's from 1st December to 31st December. And then for the 4th quarter, which is from the 1st of October to the 31st of December. And then we also presented for the whole year from January 1st to 31st December. Now, for that month, speaking about abduction, what we saw was an increase of about less than 12% nationally. But interestingly, in the FCT, we saw an increase of 168%.
Wow.
In the FCT, 168%. Now, I've seen your reaction. And that is what I expected the managers of our public security to react, because this product is a tool for security management. You are able to look at it and realize, okay, I'm doing well here, I'm not doing well there. That place where I'm doing well, what am I doing that brought the numbers down? That place where I'm not doing well, for instance, the FCT that saw the 168% increment, what didn't we do well? Unfortunately, that didn't happen, sadly. Now, at the national level, like I said, we saw an increase of 11%. Places where that increase reflected outside of the FCT is Sokoto, Borno, Niger State, Kaduna State. Those are where we saw. And when we dug deeper, the common feature that cuts across all of these locations is the activities of two groups. Okay. The non-state armed groups, which, depending on where they are either called bandits or in some instances terrorists or several other names. So they were chiefly responsible for those abductions. The second groups are the criminal groups who are engaged just for the financial ransom that they would collect and benefit from it. Now, irrespective of the group, the motive was the same: collect money. So that took us to the third observation. How were they able to collect this money and then spend it? Yes. So because we also have a section within Beacon that supports crisis management, we know that a significant portion of the ransom is being paid through our banking system. That worried us a lot. Yeah. Because that means the banking system is not regulated in the manner that it should be. And when we dug deeper to look at the policy, we saw that the CBN is supposed to carry out certain elements of that. Then the NFIU is also supposed to carry out certain elements of that. And then interestingly, when the ECOWAS unit GABA, I've forgotten the full meaning of GABA now, they did a review of our financial institutions, and they submitted a report. And it was very clear from their report that we have a lot of work to do in terms of making sure the financial sector is regulated to reduce terrorist financing. Because that's the point I want to bring out here. Yeah. A significant portion of the ransom that was being collected goes into terrorist financing. And then, of course, illicit, crimes and weapons and all of that.
I mean, I'm bringing in my quotes because at this point, I think I need to take a break to just ponder on what I've just heard. Yeah, Ibrahim.
Yeah, I think maybe just to follow up on part of Cynthia's question, is that are there some trends that we see in the different geopolitical regions? A few years ago, the Northeast was ravaged by some form of terrorism in some certain states, but we see in the Northwest, it seems to have a different coloration in some other parts of the South. If you can just give us a brief overview on what are the different specific security or insecurity threats across the different geopolitical zones. Okay,
let me start from the Northeast, which is, for all intents and purposes, probably the most security challenged part of the country at the moment. Of course, there are the ideological non-state armed groups. I prefer to call them that because of the various nomenclatures and dimensions of what they do. So those ideological ones, it's very clear that they are driven by ideological motives, and there are basically two or three in number. The Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah lil-Dawati wal-Jihad that everybody calls Boko Haram, and then the Islamic State in West Africa province, otherwise called ISWAP, and then the Ansaru group. Now they are still active. What we saw in December is there was a lull in their deployment of IEDs, improvised explosive devices. But in December, we started seeing they were going back to that method. Over time, we've seen changes in the method of attacks. So that was quite important. Another thing we saw is attack on infrastructure. So power infrastructure were being targeted. And when we dug deeper, we found out that it was a campaign. They call it an economic war, where they realized that if they hit the economy, then it could help them to achieve their objectives. So they started targeting power infrastructure. They targeted, I think, on two or three occasions, power infrastructure along the Maiduguri-Damaturu route. At a certain point in time, power was interrupted in two major cities, Damaturu and Maiduguri. Last year, for about 6 months, there was no public power supply in Maiduguri as a result of that.
6 months.
Yeah. Another thing we also monitored was a global campaign that they started. This was from their global affiliates. In the case of the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah lil-Dawati wal-Jihad, Al-Qaeda, they were more aligned with Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda, as well as the Islamic State in West Africa province, they released a statement condemning the Israeli attack on Gaza and urged all their members across the world to start carrying out attacks. And incidentally, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, we monitored as at early January, at least 4 of these attacks, including one in Nasarawa State, as close to the FCT as possible. And then, of course, in Borno State, in Yobe State, in Adamawa State, we also monitored such attacks. And in all of these instances, there was chatter either in online medium or space or in publications, where the groups that carry out those attacks would say it's in response to this call by the global body, IS, Islamic State, or Al-Qaeda. So point I'm trying to make is there's also this element within the Northeast where happenings, geopolitical developments were impacting security within the region. So that's for the ideological groups, still very active in the Northeast. Then there were also criminal groups who would replicate the activities of these ideological, non-state armed groups, and then maybe block the road, abduct individuals, and then other types of criminal activities.
So is that what we see a lot in the Northwest and in the North Central?
Exactly.
Yeah, Quincy, why? Because you were just not there. I mean, what's your biggest worry so far? Then also your question.
So my question is, you said that in FCT there's high, like 168 increase of
percent
of insecurity, and also we can see that this January there've been high incidents of kidnapping in FCT. Why is that?
Okay, I did release a statement. Beacon Consulting released a statement. Well, we were able to document, and I want to be very clear. It's not everything we see on social media that is authenticated. We pass all our reports through a process where we authenticate them, and then we were able to document 69 incidents of abduction in FCT between January 1st and January 18th. As at 69
incidents of abduction between January 1st and 18th.
Wow. And this is in spite of the public outcry. The president has spoken. Yes. The minister has spoken. In fact, he's currently doing a town hall meeting across the councils.
He was in the Abuja area council or the town. I think he's going to other area councils.
Exactly. Now, to tell you what is missing, which is your question, the managers of our public security have not appreciated the vulnerabilities that exist in the FCT. Before any crime can occur, there will be vulnerabilities. The crime is actually a cycle. The criminal also does his own research. He looks at an environment, identify the vulnerabilities, and then he or she goes ahead to commit that crime. Now, in the case of the FCT, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, there were 2 groups that were responsible from the December incidents. We are yet to do an analysis of the 69 that I mentioned, but when we did that of December, we found that 2 groups were responsible: the bandits, or non-state armed groups, as we prefer to call them, and then the criminal groups. Now, what they do is there are paths that cut across the mountainous and forested parts of FCT Abuja. I hike a lot, and so I know these parts, and you can easily call them ungoverned spaces, because there are parts that are not in any way monitored by any of our security forces. We hike in the daytime, so we know that there is no quote unquote government presence, and by that I'm not expecting government to deploy even human beings. In security, you have the option of people, you have the option of systems, and you have the option of technology. Sometimes you marry these 3 together to create the ideal, a hybrid of that. So we don't have that kind of surveillance capabilities within those parts. So they come in through those parts, carry out these attacks, escape through those parts, and then because we don't have presence in these ungoverned spaces that are outside Abuja. Now, Abuja is surrounded by 4 states that are also security challenged: Kogi, Nasarawa, Niger, and Kaduna. So they escape into all of these 4 states, and they're able to keep their victims there and then negotiate. And that brings us to the 3rd element. They negotiate through the phone. They call the victims' families and continue the negotiation. And I'm sorry to say, because I'm in that space, I know that our security agencies have the capability to actually monitor and identify the location.
And track it, because why are they not? Because when you said this call, every time you hear of an abduction, they call a family member. They follow up. to give their demands. So why is it that the security agencies are not tracking?
They are tracking. I know this for a fact. They are tracking.
We're not getting the results that we want.
Now, the reason why we're not getting the result is simply because there is no accountability within the security sector. We need to call a spade a spade. There is no accountability within the security sector. And it's obvious if there was a 168% increment in security abduction.
Yes.
We have to be very clear. That's just for abduction. Not the other issues.
Yeah.
And till date, no one has been held accountable. Not a single person has been held accountable, either at administrative query or even telling the person, look, step aside, you are not doing well, let this guy or lady come and try. So that's really the reason. The other reason, and again, so that it doesn't look like I'm putting all the blame on the public security managers, the tactical proficiency that is required to rescue victims of abduction is extremely sophisticated. I do not think we have that tactical proficiency at the moment, and it's not because monies have not been set aside for it, and it's also not because trainings have not been conducted. Trainings have been conducted where our security forces are one of the most trained in the world. They go to Israel, they go to the US, they go to all over the world to acquire this training. But unfortunately, as a nation, we've not mustered a coordinated approach to ensure that we have a tactical unit that has that proficiency to be able to go into a location, rescue kidnapped victims, and then bring them out. And then I'm going to speak about something that I know that you guys hold very dear, which is the role of the National Assembly. Every year they pass a budget where in that budget there is provision for these tactical units. How often do they actually check to see whether those budgets are spent in the manner that has been outlined within the budget itself? So I think that's another challenge. Those monies are there, trainings are being conducted, and sometimes equipment are being procured. But I can tell you in all confidence, based on the knowledge I have, that we do not have tactical units that have that type of proficiency. So the Inspector General of Police launched a tactical unit. I do not think that tactical unit have the proficiency required for precision style operations, the type that we saw when the US deployed to the border area between Sokoto and Niger and rescued their citizens. We need to have that because monies are actually contained in the budget every year for that. So we need it. I hope I've been able to answer.
I wanted to bring in the goals. Like, just listening to the conversation so far, what are your thoughts? What's your major worry now?
So far, I've just been having fear and anxiety because the recent incident that happened in Abuja in Sangwari layout is just close to where I reside, and I just find it difficult to even move around. When I come back from work, I just lock myself inside and I'm just scared to even go out. And so that's just my worry. I just hope and believe that this whole kidnapping, adoption stuff will just come to an end. It's just like a nightmare. Most
of us, once we close and get home, even if your social life is also threatened, because if you want to go somewhere to even hang out with friends, your first consideration is who can guarantee my safety? Because it's almost, and I didn't even have the full picture of the numbers of incidents of abduction. So if you're telling us that within just 18 days, 1st of January to 18th of January 2024, you've had 69 abductions. It's in my mind, I'm also thinking, okay, this is just a lot of number, because each abduction could have more than one victim. There is no likelihood that it's one abduction, one victim. So, and as citizens, because I want to bring in, what can we do as young Nigerians, as citizens? Ibrahim and even Queen CY, before we get back to our guests, because we can't just sit back and allow things to get worse and basically live our lives in fear and anxiety.
Yeah, so I think, many times we lay all the responsibility on the table of the government, so to speak, even though, yes, the government has a role to play more than anything else. But when we think about bandits or criminals, they reside within communities with other citizens. I think the primary role that citizens need to play is, if you see something, say something. where you live, if you see some suspicious groupings of human beings, you should report it to the closest police station or to the closest security agency that can take action. For me, because insecurity affects so many parts of our lives. We're talking about social life. Quincy, why can't go out to have fun? We're talking about economic life. Either you're paying ransom or businesses are afraid to open past some certain times during the day. And it might also affect political life in one way or another. And politics also has a role to play in either breeding insecurity or also ensuring that there is more security for citizens. But I think for citizens, it's to remain vigilant, also to be careful about where you go, inform yourself. I don't know if any of you saw this post that was going on social media where NYSC had this handbook and was saying you should familiarize yourself with your kidnappers if anything happens to you. It was very weird. But what I took from that was that you should equip yourself with more information. What should you do in a situation where something happens? What should be the kind of response as a citizen? What should be your first response as a citizen?
Yeah, because when Mr. Kabir was talked about National Assembly, I think most times we talk about the president, governors at the state level, but there's an important arm of government that needs to be working now, which was why it did not make sense when they decided to extend their resumption, because the idea is the National Assembly, that's where we have our representatives who speak on our behalf, who demand accountability and ensure oversight. And if every year there are budgets or budgetary allocations to even the tactical unit you talked about, to equip our security agencies and nothing is done, and it means we have 469 representatives who are not doing the job that they're supposed to do, minus at the state level, because we also know that there are security allocations to every state through the state government. And so in my mind, I'm also thinking that as citizens, this is time to start calling your reps. We can't live in fear. We can't be living in anxiety, especially for younger people. You can imagine the number of businesses that are affected because of insecurity. Even the small businesses that work in some of these locations, most of them close their businesses to just go and be safe. And I think it's for every one of us. We need to know who our lawmakers are in the House of Reps, in the Senate, and start calling them. If it means bombarding their phones. And I wouldn't even mind. Let's move to the National Assembly, because at this point, no, you know me now, action. We go to the streets. It doesn't make sense that citizens have to pay ransom. And most time people even die. Not everyone who paid ransom was safe or secure. There are those who, after they paid, they were killed. Some of them, by the time they released them, they were in such a bad state medically, that they died almost immediately. And so, whether you know who has been abducted, somehow these are our fellow citizens. They are our brothers and sisters, one way or the other. And because I'm coming back to our guest, you talked about even the banking sector, how some of these transactions go through the banks. No one is tracking it. We're not even working from that point of view. But then the security architecture, because when we said this convention, we talked, because I think it's all encompassing. If we have a security system that works, it will be difficult to even make transactions that sponsors terrorism through our financial institutions. So why is our security system will I say overwhelmed or inadequate to meet our national security needs?
Again, that A word that nobody wants to hear, accountability. I think we need to go back and enhance accountability within the security sector. It's a legacy of the military rule, the years of military rule that we've had in a country where security is seen from the prism of the military, as it were. And because they were the ones in charge, they were not quote unquote accountable. It was what they wanted to do that they would do. And unfortunately, despite the fact that this is the longest, I think, republic that we've had in the country, we haven't seen an improvement in that accountability element within our security sector. One of the things that I'm hoping for, and I will speak freely here, is I want to see more training for the leadership of the committees on security in the National Assembly. I personally have advocated for that. I have attempted to, because the sector is a bit technical. And because of this legacy that I've mentioned, most of the persons heading these committees do not have the requisite knowledge for oversight of the sector. So one of the things that has happened in this administration that I'm happy about is the performance measurement system, the Executive Order 13 that was institutionalized into governance. And you recall in November, the president signed and a bond, performance bond with the ministers and the permanent secretaries. And then he has mandated his special advisor on policy and coordination to now spearhead the CDCU, the Central Delivery Coordination Unit. Unfortunately, all of these discussions, even though a significant portion of the security sector is involved, but not all the security sector is involved in that sector. So I'm hoping that the National Assembly would also embrace the same philosophy. We shouldn't run away from data. Data is important. Data helps you see from a bird's eye view or whether you are making progress or not. So I'm advocating strongly that both the executive arm and the legislative arm embrace the data, and in doing that, strengthen their M&E capabilities so that there are M&E measures within the security sector. We should have KPIs that would tell them, the players, and us citizens, whether progress is being made. As a citizen, I want to be able to drive from Kaduna to Abuja 2 a.m.
Yes.
For me, that's the simplest way I know there is an improvement in security. If I look back through the year, none of my persons in my space has been affected by security, then I'm happy. If, however, every day I'm hearing complaints that this person has been abducted or this person can't go to the market, can't do that, then I know there is no improvement in security. So point is, we should have a system, a method for measuring performance within the sector. And I think this is perhaps part of the reason why the architecture is not as effective as it should be. The approach at the moment does not measure performance, unfortunately.
Yeah, we see why.
My question is, are these incidents happening in communities in states, are they factors that are enabling the vulnerability of this?
Yes, most of these communities are remote communities, far from the urban centers, and the deployment of security is thin. So that's factor number one, very thin deployment of security forces. Factor number two is the point I talked earlier on ungoverned spaces, where these bad guys are domiciled. Then they're able to come out, carry out their attacks. And then, of course, the third one is we're yet to have a system in place to prevent the mobility of these actors, the non-state armed groups. They move on bikes. As a date, as a country, we've not come up with a method to prevent that movement. I mean, think about it. 100 of them sometimes move. And then not just one person on the bike, sometimes two, sometimes three persons on the bike. If we have capabilities, and these are in today's world, it's not that difficult. To detect that type of movement. And then to deploy one asset can obliterate that group.
Yeah.
And we've not done that. So those are some of the reasons, unfortunately. I also want to talk about, I know we all talked about what citizens can do. In that type of public security, anti-terrorism or counter-terrorism or even anti-banditry, it's important to develop the resilience of communities. Now, we haven't done, as a country, we've not done enough of that. Most people don't know what to do. As a country, we've not developed that resilience within our local communities to understand that some of their actions are contributing to them being targeted as a people. So we need to develop their resilience, and this is the responsibility of government. We can't run away from it.
Sure.
There are certain departments in government who have that responsibility. Today, if you go to the US, in fact, don't even go there. From your laptop, click on Department of Homeland Security. You'll be amazed at the resources you find there. They will tell you as an individual, this is what you need to do to reduce your vulnerability. As a corporate organization, these are the guidelines and checklists that you should do to reduce your vulnerability. And then as a community, this is what you need to do. Now, this is government understanding that it cannot be everywhere, but it can, with the development of the resilience in individuals, corporate organizations, communities, together working as one, they can all battle the enemy together. We don't have that in Nigeria. You can't go to SSS website. You can't go to NSA's website. You can't go
or even the Nigerian
police website or NSCDC.
Yes, because I'm bringing in my co-host here, and I'm just thinking, just this conversation around insecurity is an ongoing one, because it seems like we're here already. It's getting worse. From your data, it doesn't seem to. We can't see major improvements, and we have we call them our gallant soldiers, who also risk their lives because they are not even. Most of them are not properly equipped. And so I'm thinking, if you had an audience with the president, your senator, and your House of Reps member, what would you be saying to them now with the level of anger that we have? If you had an audience, maybe
well, that would be tough, because many times people are unhappy with the current security situation, and it seems as if not enough is being done. I think one of the things I would say is it's important to communicate what is being done so that citizens feel that you can go about your daily business. I think many times, even on this show, we've spoken about the importance of communication and accountability.
Yes.
And I was very glad that Mr. Adamu, that was one of the first angles he took the conversation from, and said there needs to be accountability. If someone is responsible for securing a certain area and he or she fails to do their job, what accountability mechanisms have been taken? And I would say you need to fire one or two people.
Exactly.
So that we know that there are consequences for actions or inactions, which is very important, and that helps to build citizens' trust. That says, if I appoint Queen CY into this position and she does not do what she needs to do, she can lose her job. And when others say that, I can lose my job, it's no longer business as usual, other people would sit up. It's not just enough to say, there's deterrence for criminals. You should also deter people who do not do their jobs when they're in public office.
Yeah, Queen CY.
What I'll tell the president or House of I was sleeping that I'm not happy. I'm not happy with everything going on. I'm not happy that I cannot leave the house without thinking about my life not being safe. I'm not happy that people are suffering. I'm not happy that families are suffering on a daily because of their loved ones being kidnapped. So you should fix up your security system. Period.
Fix up your security system. Yeah. And because we're running up the conversation, from your conversation, we've also seen the correlation with the socioeconomic context, because you also talked about the fact that you have economic hardship, which has also driven a lot of people, into crime. Let's put it that way, because some of these kidnappers are basically criminals. There's no ideology driving anything that they are doing. So there is that. And this month alone, inflation was already at 28.9% in Nigeria, meaning, and a lot of the projections indicate that we're going to have tougher economic times before we get to somewhere reasonably safe. So one of my fears now is, are we going to even see more incidents of crime, of abductions, of, threats to life, of robbery? Because some of these are also, armed robbery is also becoming a thing. And my worry is that we're likely going to see a lot of that. But I'm not sure the political class is aware of their role in all of this. And that's because your report talked about the political aspect. And I was discussing with Ibrahim earlier. We said, what happens to the arms given to thugs to disrupt electoral processes? Do these politicians that arm these groups and give them drugs, do they retrieve these arms? Is this also a contributory factor to the number of small arms and light weapons we have with a lot of citizens now? And what the political class, what are they doing when it comes to, this whole situation? And this will be like my final question. And anyone can jump at it.
Because we don't have time, let me kind of say one thing that will cover everything you've said. I think the president needs to convene the National Security Council. In our security architecture, that's the highest body for security. And that body is meant to advise the president. Now we have a challenge in our hands. And everybody agrees that we have a challenge. I cannot understand why the National Security Council has not sat. It should be convened,
Yeah.
and all of these things that you've mentioned will be discussed. Yes, weapons proliferation is an issue, and you're right. The arming of non-state actors, I prefer to call them that, including the political talks,
Yes.
is one of the ways weapons proliferation is here with us. So yes, convene that council where they have a frank conversation among themselves, and I'm hoping that after that council meeting, he's going to give them a directive, because he's actually given directives so far this year. I think he's given like 2 or 3 directives, and those directives are not being implemented for the simple reason that they were given outside the framework, the security sector framework that we know. So the highest of that framework, that architecture, is the council. I believe that council should sit, and then at the end of that council, just like they did in FEC, which is a misnomer by the way, FEC has no business. Going into, they can discuss it at the level of, let's say, okay, we've spoken to the Oyo State Governor, the Oyo State Governor has provided us an interim report, but to discuss technical security issues, the Constitution says the National Security Council, and it should have been convened.
Yeah.
So that for me is number one. Then the National Assembly, the moment they are back, instead of they
better resume
the invitation that they do, which honestly is not effective.
Yeah.
Every time they invite this leadership, let them use the tool they have, which is the oversight tool. Develop KPIs, and then make sure those KPIs are checked whenever they do their oversight from visits and checks on the various ministries, departments, and agencies.
Yeah, I think for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, from calling the full name, because he's a president that represents the whole of Nigeria, convening the National Security Council should be what would have begun the year with, actually. Especially if you really claim as a president that you listen, there's been a lot of commissioner, I feel the pulse of the people, I'm bringing renewed hope. We can't have renewed hope if there's high rates of insecurity. And so this is a very important message that the president needs to convene the National Security Council. And I think for me, my parting shot would be, as citizens, we need to remain vigilant. But please, if there's one role we have in a democracy, is to hold our government to account. And so we have to start screaming at people now. Our lawmakers, what are you doing? How are you performing oversight? It's not just invitation. Invitation to what? If you don't know how to go about it, get the requisite capacity. And you talked about training of committee members. I actually believe that is very important, because you can't oversight a sector you have no capacity on how to go about it, right? And I think capacity is requisite for those who manage committees on security. And I think for every Nigerian out there, please know who your lawmakers are. I think that's where we need to put our own pressure on, screaming and calling our lawmakers to begin to do their work effectively. What will be your parting shot to our audience?
I think I'll say that security is everyone's business.
True.
And it has so many implications. Insecurity in a small community has implications for the local government, for the state, for the country, for the region. So everyone needs to take security serious, whether you're an individual, a corporate organization, a state actor, a non-state actor. Security belongs to all of us.
All of us. Yeah, I can see why.
So I would say, you've all said it all, but when they say security, it's not just about kidnapping. It goes beyond that. Some insecurities can be prevented by just fixing the road or even repairing the street lights.
Yeah.
Some little things we can just do in our communities to just make it right. So I'll just urge the government to look into all these things and fix the community.
Yeah.
So that insecurity will reduce.
True. And to our audience, what do we say?
To our audience, we care about you, we care about your security, but also remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode and many other episodes of the podcast.
Yes, and Queen CY, shout out to the guys behind the scene.
Well, shout out to our director, Hamilton Odemenam. Shout out to Fredcoker, our cinematographer. Shout out to DJ Drexx, our sound engineer. Shout out to Chi, our co-host. Shout out to Andrea, our co-host also. Shout out to Ifeanyi, our cinematographer also. And
Yeah, I think we missed Ayo.
Ayo.
Shout out to Ayo.
Shout out to Ayo. Shout out
And
to
Austin.
Samuel. Shout out to Austin.
And Steven.
And shout out to Steven.
Yes.
We all love you.
Yes. You know, the Unamplified Podcast, we have a team. It's not just the faces you see in front of your screen. We have a powerhouse working to put together an amazing show. And like we say, keep a date with us every Wednesday. And to our guests, thank you so much. Sir, it's been a wealth of knowledge, and I'm glad we were able to break down these issues. So thank you so much for spending time with us, and really to appreciate Beacon Consulting Limited for the work you do. When you talked about lack of data, security, risk management, I'm just like, we have a lot of data for these guys to work with. And I really hope our security agencies and even our National Assembly committees, that they would also look at these reports that you've provided and use that to inform the work that they do. Thank you so much. And we always end with, so we raise our cup, we say, when you're on, you're amplified. Cheers to Africa.
Cheers.
Cheers.